As the deer panteth for the waters, so my soul longeth after thee. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship thee. You alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship thee. You're my friend, and you are my brother, even though you are a king. I love you more than any other, so much more than anything. You alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship thee. I want you more than gold or silver, only you can satisfy. You alone are the real joy giver and the apple of my eye. You alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship thee. Lord, we lift this to you with hearts of gratitude and say, let this be a blessing unto you and be used for good and for truth and for making the world a brighter and more beautiful place, as we acknowledge that you alone are the answer. Amen. Just join me in the Lord's Prayer before we begin. And you might as well sit, that's good. Saying, Our Father, who art in the heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so upon the earth. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. So we're looking at the virtue dignity today. Begin with the question, do you believe that you deserve dignity and respect from other people? Hands up, I think. Yes. Do you yourself show people dignity and respect? Yeah. Always? Most of the time. We try, don't we? Interesting, isn't it? There's an innate knowing inside us that people deserve dignity and respect, especially if I think about myself. I don't want people to respect me or not show dignity to me, for many reasons, but particularly because how do you know me when all you can see are some moments, some external moments, isn't it? And yet, when it goes to giving it out to others, that's when the challenge comes. And some of us have learned to really be good at that. But what about in traffic? I think that's a great example. Traffic's a great example, isn't it, of when you really test the level of your commitment to showing respect and dignity to other people, isn't it? Now, online is another place, I think, where people have really shown a lack of regard, respect and dignity for others. And I wonder if it's this kind of separation a little bit. When you're in a car, you're surrounded by a big piece of metal and glass, and they're racing off, and you don't know what's going on in their world, that kind of thing. And then when you're online, again, you're separated by a piece of glass and lots of technology and wires. So I wonder if that's part of the problem. But it isn't. Impatience is the problem?
Yes.
Yeah. I think in the road, on the traffic road, impatience is what opens Pandora's box, and we see that it's a lot harder, isn't it, to show that dignity and respect. It is. It sort of drops.
I don't have a problem. I just sit there and take it for granted. If I have to wait 10 minutes, I have to wait 10 minutes.
Mm.
I leave half an hour earlier than I should.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, yeah, don't you
Yes.
laugh?
We won't laugh because we're practicing dignity and respect this month. That's the challenge. No, look, dignity is an incredible virtue. And all of these virtues are really about our relationship with others. It's about loving the neighbour. But dignity is one of those virtues that begins to really cross the boundary between love of neighbour and love to the Lord. And what I'm really suggesting here is that until you deepen your love to the Lord, showing dignity and respect to others is something that you will fail at times. You may get a habit or a practice. It might be socially or culturally that you know to show respect, but under certain circumstances you will not show dignity and respect, because really, in reality, who alone deserves our respect? The Lord, isn't it?
I find it hard to show respect and dignity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about one of the last times I went to Brisbane. People wanting things, collecting for this or collecting that, and being rather assertive, if not aggressive, in almost blocking your way. I understand certain charities have the rights on Fridays on the streets of Brisbane. So it's very difficult. I found it very difficult to show respect and dignity to these people. In fact, it's hard not to be annoyed, and it was hard not to be annoyed with people like that. I didn't feel very respectful towards them because I felt they weren't being very respectful
Towards you.
towards me.
Exactly. That's well said, Ian. I had my own story just recently of being in Bunnings, which I'm not overly proud of, but I'm standing in a long line with my son, and so I pull out the phone because I'm thinking, I need to search something. It's part of the world we live in, isn't it? And I'm searching something, trying to find something out, to try to save time later, and the line's getting shorter and shorter, and then it comes up to the point, and there's another line feeding in, because you're at Bunnings where they do cut the keys, and there's several servers, and I've been watching carefully. I wasn't just being ignorant, I was really careful, and there was another person standing over a young fellow waiting to be served. And so the lady says, "Who's next?" And I put my phone down and I say, "I believe that gentleman over there has been waiting." And this guy pushes past me and says, "Well, if you're going to argue about it, I'll go." And just pushes right up to the line. And so then I said, "How rude." This is the moment I'm not proud of. I'm not proud of saying, "How rude. There's karma, And he turns around and says, well, if you're going to be on the phone in the line, this was his justification, if you're going to be on the phone on the line, then I'll go. I said, there was somebody else waiting, but it was all getting the noise, it just gets lost. And there is that sense where we want justice, don't we? You know, and I think this is where it becomes difficult to maintain. I would like to say that I maintained a level of dignity. I didn't shout, I didn't jump, I didn't get upset. And some part of me let it go too. I just thought, there is karma. You know, he's going to do what he's going to do. And life has a balancing act that it will play out upon that man. Not God judging, but life itself will balance itself out. So it's a tough one, Ian. I think that we shouldn't tolerate evil. Because as we're going to find out here, evil is offered as the opposite of dignity. So it's not dignity to tolerate evil either. But how do we handle these situations? How do we be like the angels? You know, they always see the best in each other. On that note, rather than just jump straight in, I want you to flip to the back and get this in our thoughts early on. Let's read the passage on the back. We're going a little bit differently today, but that's all right. Many times I have observed, this is from spiritual experiences, many times I have observed that persons who have been endowed in the world with the highest dignity, such as kings, who were born kings and derived this from infancy, are endowed with dignity in the other life. There's kind of an air about them. And are above others. Okay, that air of being in a... and are unable to hide or cast off that aura until after many years, perhaps hundreds, perhaps thousands. Thousands of years. How patient is the Lord? You know, it's not like they cast such an arrogant attitude out of heaven, because, you know, there's a kind of expectation we have of royalties, isn't there? And when that becomes a part of your habit, you know, as long as your heart is not I am superior, but you act in a certain mode, people are okay with that. And that's kind of what he's saying. Nevertheless, the aura of that dignity is joined with the aura of uprightness and goodness in such a way it does not trouble anyone. So as long as it's being used to service goodness, that's the key. Is this being used to service goodness in heaven? A kind of air of dignity is okay, which shows you where dignity really lies. It lies in the good, in the true, and the use. The use. We'll keep it going, and it says here, to those who were born such and are upright and good, a certain kind of appropriate subordination is shown by moral spirits. Good day to you, sir. Maybe they bow in that kind of way and talk to that person, you know. They don't want to offend. It's not hurting anyone. That person has a little bit of a kingly air about them because they were a king their entire life on earth, but they are a good person. For an upright spirit has the quality of hurting no one and being favourable to everyone. There's a story of a doctor, a young doctor. She's African American. I think her name was Dr. Singleton, but I could be wrong on that. She'd studied hard and she was a doctor by a very young age. She was working in the medical system in America, and there was an emergency line. She walks up to someone who's not her usual patient. He'd be in his 60, 65, white, Caucasian. And she says, "Good to meet you." And he says, "Good to meet you, but I'd like to have another doctor, please." And there's this kind of pause, uncomfortable feeling. Now, I'm mentioning this because of filters. We all have filters. Our belief systems create our filters. It's biological too. When you buy a new car, you'll tend to notice that car, particularly the colour, but you'll notice other versions of your car and other colours more than you did before. That's the filter of the mind working. In fact, schizophrenia is really just the breakdown of that filter. So it's a good thing, these filters that we have. A schizophrenic can't tell the difference between my voice right now and a voice inside their head. They're all real. But it's the filter that helps us distinguish between what's real and what's not. But those same filters also caused each one of us to get a little uncomfortable with that story at that moment. She says to this, the doctor says to this gentleman, look, you've only got really two options here because this is an emergency triage line you're in. You can sit down and wait, and I can't guarantee you're going to get any doctor that you're looking for, or you could work with me. Please tell me, if you will, what's your objection? He says, yes, I'll happily tell you what my objection is. You're too young to be my doctor. And we all kind of sigh a little bit of relief there, because our filter initially was it race-based?
Mine was that he may have wanted a male doctor.
May have wanted a male doctor. Perfect. Thank you for bringing that up, because these are the filters. And why I'm sharing this story is because one of the best ways to find our way into maintaining our dignity, that man who pushed in at Bunnings, maybe his father was terribly abusive. Terribly abusive. I don't know. But these kind of questioning our filters are the best way for us to maintain, like the angels, the best view of people. To try and keep ourselves in a place where we're not losing our dignity. It would not be useful for me to take that fight on with that man in that place. So a higher use is being served. I challenged him. Wow, that's very rude. You know, there's karma. Oh, leave it to you now. And the greater use was just to let it go. The funny thing was, a woman ended up saying something to him and saying, you have to go over there. And he went wandering off to some aisle. That young boy got served. And then he came back and stood on the side. And she calls me over next. And he's still standing on the side waiting. And I didn't feel happy about it, but he was waiting while I got served. And, you know, this is just, there is karma. There is karma. And it's important that when someone cuts in on you in the traffic, don't lose your dignity. Don't tolerate evil, but don't lose your dignity and your respect, because the reality is the way you treat others is leading the example of how they should behave and treat you. Let's have a look at the front there. Dignity is the virtue of celebrating each soul's worth. Now that's a challenge. Even if the individual cannot see or share in the revelation of that worth. You know, they don't share your values, they degrade life, they degrade themselves. Well, we should try and still lift up their worth and their dignity. They're still a child of God. Religion is a great one for dividing us, filtering us, and stopping us seeing that each living being, no matter what their religion, is still a creation of God, a child of God. Maybe a rebellious one, but is it for me to judge? What is for me to judge is that God loves them, and I should endeavour to have dignity and love and respect for them too. That love means I might tell them, in my opinion, what I think they should do, but I do it respectfully. Dignity flows from the understanding that each soul is uniquely created for a purpose and contains a spark from the divine eternal flame. The writings are really good at getting this truth into us. They say that each soul is born on earth as a direct response to a need in the grand man. Yeah. Now, heaven is perfect, but it's growing and expanding. And so there's always greater needs. And each one of us was born with the hope of becoming who the Lord wants us to be to fulfill that need. So even though I might prodigally be going off and making a mess of my life, abusing people, using drugs, being a terrible person, there's still that hope. And the spiritual person says, I'm going to speak to that hope. I'm going to look at that hope. I'm going to see God's call, not your poor choices. That's what dignity does. Challenging, isn't it? Challenging. But I can remember when I was in the Hare Krishnas as a young man, it was that concept that really, really began to set me straight. They teach that everything that's growing has a soul. So even rocks and minerals are growing because they have a soul. This is reincarnation, of course. What a terrible state to be, be born like that as a karmic reaction. Yeah. But everything that's growing has a soul or life, and I would agree. It's just that the human soul is different to animals for various reasons. But the idea that everything that's growing has life and that we should respect that life is important.
something that was put into me as a young man, and it has stayed with me, and it's been very helpful. Doesn't mean I don't get upset when someone cuts across me in a line, but it's very important that each one of us was created with a hope, a use and a purpose. Let's keep that in our mind and we'll find dignity easier. Dignity empowers the advancing soul with a desire to treat everyone with appreciation. It allows the soul to see beyond the world of appearances into the higher meaning and therefore into the higher worth for each life. Think about this. Hell is not punishment as much as it is the Lord allowing each soul freedom. He loves them so much, he allows them to go their way and to build the world they want to build. Because God could have created a system where if you don't choose right, you are snuffed out. It's possible he could have created that system. But my understanding is that when you read the writings carefully and you read the Bible carefully, you understand that God loves us so much that he won't even violate our free life. He won't take it from us in that way, even when we choose death. The hells are mercy of God saying, I want you with me, but if you want to live your own segregated darkness, that is your choice. Interesting, isn't it? There's a form of dignity in that even. To realize one's own purpose in life is to discover, or maybe even remember, one's own dignity, and from there to treat others with the same acknowledgement. And we're going to find this at life. At times we're remembering the dignity of ourselves and others, and other times we're forgetting it and cussing and cursing and complaining and telling, what a difficult person you are. Okay. Yes?
One's own dignity. I mean, that's hugely important because that immediately set my mind about suicide. When poor people have, sorry, I don't mean that in a disparaging way, when people sadly lose their sense of purpose, yes, or that they are a person of worth. I've brushed up against suicide several times in my ministry, and it's in each occasion it's been about my life is worthless. I have no purpose. There's no purpose for me in life. Terrible.
Ian, most people who are attempting suicide are just wanting the pain to end.
Yes. Well, the pain though is because I see my life has no purpose.
That's what I was going to say. That you're touching a very valuable point here. That a lot of suffering comes out of not having meaning.
That's exactly. That's
when you have meaning, the suffering's okay.
Yeah.
If it means something. Yeah. When you don't have meaning, it's like endless. Enduring suffering. Let it stop.
Let it stop.
Yeah. So that's such a good point. Yeah. So there's that idea that we've got to remember our dignity. We've got to remember what our value and our worth is. Go ahead there, Ken. Nice and loud. Read for us. Tame your life.
Tame your life. Imagine you were born into royalty. How might this have affected the way you treat others, your manners and character? Now stop and consider the truth that you indeed are born from an essence much higher than earthly royalty. Does this make you want to change any aspect of your current life?
It's an interesting thought, isn't it? The idea that if you had been born into royalty, you would have been trained from a very young age to have respect for your office, for your calling, for your purpose. There's a dignity in that, isn't it? And I'm suggesting here the idea that each soul is born from a spiritual royalty, from the divine themselves. Each spark has come from the Lord. And that carries, even the rebellious child, that carries a certain love and respect. God loves each one of us. Would you, Diane, read for us? Getting your reading glasses? Definition.
Doesn't help that they're dirty. Definition. The state or quality of being worthy of honour or respect, composed and serious manner or style.
State or quality of being worthy of honour or respect. Isn't that interesting? Because on one level, none of us are worthy of honour of ourselves. But on another level, the honour comes from the fact that God wanted us to exist. Mathematically, the sums have been calculated on the chances of you existing in this time, this place, with these parents, at this point in time now. And the figures are astronomical. The chances of you existing right now, as you are 1 in 400 billion. You're not a mistake. So in that sense, God wanted you, and that's where the honour lies. All the honour lies in what God's use for you is. Go on, Bev, Di, read a little bit more, the synonyms now. Yes.
Decency, decorum, grace, grandeur, greatness, honour, morality, poise, prestige, quality, respectability, self-respect, stature, status, virtue, address. Catch it. What's that?
Cachet, I think the T's silent.
Character, consequence, courtliness, culture, distinction, elevation, eminence, ethics, etiquette, glory, gravity, hauteur. Yeah.
That was less than half of the list. I couldn't believe, usually when you look on the dictionary, you get a decent number of corresponding virtues and qualities. The thing about putting a dictionary together, I studied linguistics at uni, is that you can't use the exact same word. You've got to use another word that captures another essence or flavour of that word without actually, you can't say dignity is being dignified. That's not good enough. No, dear. So it just stunned me, the amount of words and flavour this word dignity really carries. And I was even more stunned by the opposites. Go on, Ian, nice and loud, read for us the opposites there. Did you say me? Yeah, nice and loud. Dishonour. Evil. Immorality. Indecency.
Insignificance.
Ooh, insignificance.
Unimportant. Bad manners. Worthlessness. Lowliness.
Isn't that fascinating? How many people have been stripped of their dignity today because they've been told there is no God? Think about that. Really think about what that does to the soul. There is no God. You're just a hapless amoeba that happened in time and space and you mean nothing. Wow. I wonder if that explains why maybe there's a real lack of respect in culture today. Isn't it? And people just, look down on religion. But religion is actually saying you have intrinsic value. That's incredible. Incredible. Yeah. All right, Bev, would you go in to start the quotes? Yes.
First quote is by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, very North American name. To me, what socialism means is to guarantee a basic level of dignity. It's asserting the value of saying that the America we want, or he wants, and the America that we are proud of is one in which all children can access a dignified education. It's one in which no person is too poor to have the medicines they need to live.
Fascinating quote, because if you just look at this idea that if you don't have spiritual value or worth, if you take God out of education, for example, you're going to struggle to give anyone any dignity. Yet people, here's someone promoting socialism, and that's okay, there's a place for socialism. But if you take God out of it, you take away the individual, you can't just keep drumming the drum of humanitarian value. We have 40 to 50 million abortions each year. because there's belief that those are it's just a machine. They're not souls. They're not individual souls that have a right to exist. Now, I'm not saying this is such a complicated issue, abortion, but all I'm saying is that when you're not going to achieve this utopia of dignity for people if we keep trying to take God out of the picture. It just won't work. Right. Go on, read another one for us, Bev. There.
Jackie Robinson, the most luxurious possession, the richest treasure anybody has is his or her personal dignity.
Wow. That's just profound, isn't it? You take that away from people, you're robbing them. There's dignity again, you know. Okay, I'll read a couple. Freedom is the open window through which pours the sunlight of human spirit and human dignity. Freedom. I leave you free to have your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own voice. I don't want to rob you of your voice. Okay, now, we all know that we shouldn't be hateful and all that kind of stuff, but I leave you the dignity of having your own thoughts, your own feelings, and your own voice. And the way to be dignified is if somebody's acting in a way that you don't value, convince them. Convince them with love and respect, with your own example, your own life, through history, whatever. Convince them. Not with a gun. Not with an economic gun. Not with a political gun. Not with a social gun. But by a character. Convince them. Because anything else is going to violate their freedom and they're just going to resist you all the more. And yet we sometimes think today, or people think today, that you can economically convince people to be different. Well, like, is it economically? You're not, fining people, punishing them, take away rights, things like that. If they don't, if they don't see things the way I see. I mean, it's different if someone's speeding and could cause harm to lives. That's different. There's a place for it. But fining people for having a speech that's different to you, it's happening. It happens. The other day I heard about a woman in, I think it was it in Iran or no? I can't remember where it was, but it was in the Middle East, and she was out there saying, women shouldn't have to wear burqas. She was beaten. They threw a rug over her and dragged her away, because this is the belief. This is the belief. You have, well, it might be a law, but the belief. It's a law. It's not a God law, that's for sure. It's a
country law, that's what
I know what you mean. I know what you're saying, yeah. Yeah, just because man says it's right doesn't mean it's right. There's a totally robbing that person of the right to say, I don't want to have to wear this. And they're beaten up, and who knows where that woman is now. Probably in jail, because it's a law. If she's lucky.
She should have been in a different country asking or giving that speech.
And she mightn't have the opportunity to do that, yeah. Yeah, wow. Another one, Herbert Hoover. Freedom, I just read that, Herbert Hoover, sorry. John C. Maxwell. There are two kinds of pride. I really like this. Two kinds of pride, both good and bad. A good pride, respect, good respect is what he's saying. A good pride represents our dignity and self-respect. Bad pride is the deadly sin of superiority that reeks of conceit and arrogance. So you've got a filter going there, haven't you? There's a filter, there's a belief system. I'm superior. And when I'm superior, you better show me respect. And I don't need to necessarily show you respect or dignity. And what's been lost there is real value. Each person is a child of God. Did Jesus say, or did he not say, whatever you do to the least of them, you've done it to me? That's spiritual vision. That's having that dignity. Okay, and some scriptural quotes. Genesis 49:3. Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellence of dignity and the excellence of power. Firsts always in Scripture symbolize the Lord. You give the tithe of your field, or you give the first of your fruits to the Lord. Reuben here represents that which is of the Lord. That's where the dignity lies. Each one of us is a soul first, then a human, then an Australian, then a Liberal or a Labor, or a Green, or whatever. These definitions, and they are dividing us, and they are creating filters upon which people are losing their respect and the dignity, and they want to silence people because their views are not like mine. They've lost sight of the real value. Reuben, you are my firstborn. Dignity. Exodus 28:40. Make tunics, sashes, headbands for Aaron's sons to give them dignity and splendour. I think it was only, was it last family service or the one before we talked about, no, it was Easter. We talked about clothing. Do you remember what clothing is? Symbolically, clothing represents truth, doesn't it? Okay, well, here's a piece of clothing that I'm wearing, but it has a different symbolism to any other truth. I might wear a tie to show respect and say I'm part of a business class, but I wear this to say what I'm doing as an office unto the Lord. And so here, clothing is truth, but this is Scripture's talking about very special clothing. For what purpose? It's for the priest. So what's its purpose? It's for serving God. Not man. Man gets served from it secondarily. In fact, in Ezekiel 44, it talks about priests who went astray into idolatry, and how God said, because you're in idolatry, you're not going to actually be able to do the office of a priest and minister unto me. But I'll let you minister to the people at the gates. And at the gates is where the lambs were sacrificed. So it's talking about preaching Christ and Christ crucified. How many messages you hear never go beyond Christ and Christ crucified? Because they don't minister to the Lord. They don't know the deep things of God. So these garments are saying, make special garments for the priest for when they minister to me. And these garments are what? What does it say? Sashes and tunics. And headbands. Give them dignity and splendour. Because I love you and I show respect to you first and foremost because of the Lord. And that's how we get ourselves out of this trap of when people do horrible things to us. You know, okay, hands up if you feel or believe that our community, our spiritual community, doesn't engage in backbiting. And hopefully every hand, I'm going to keep my hand up. Every hand should go up. Our community does not engage in backbiting. Hands up. You want me to rephrase that for you, Di? Yeah. Hands up if you believe our community has learned not to go around backbiting each other. Now, hang on. Now, keep it... No, sorry, our new church, the Brisbane Society. The Brisbane Society here. Sorry, I should have clarified. I love the fact that she's making me clarify. Yeah, hands up. Now, hands up if you think we've always been successful at not backbiting each other in our spiritual community. I think there's been times, Ian, where people have had terrible fights among each other and said things about each other.
Yes, in the past.
In the past.
We're talking in the past as the thing, yes, it's documented.
It's documented. No, that's right. It is. Now, I'm not saying that to judge or condemn. I'm just saying, okay, now hands up if you've ever been backbitten. Someone you've been in a job place or workplace and someone you found out someone's backbitten you. You're very lucky if you've never had it happen to you. Hands up if you've backbitten.
I guess that's true.
It's true of me too. You know.
Gossip, is gossip, you considering gossip the same as backbiting or
the person you were talking about is not present to defend themselves, and you were talking about them.
Oh, yeah.
in a non-positive way. You know, think of Socrates' 3 filters here. You know, someone says to Socrates, you know, oh, let me tell you the latest story about your friend. I don't know, whoever it was. And he says, Socrates says, hang on, can I do the 3 tests filter first? And he goes, what's that? I said, well, can I do it? And he goes, yeah. He says, do you know this to be true? He says, well, I wasn't there. I just heard it secondhand. Okay, well, there's still 2 other tests. Is this a good story? Not really. Oh, okay. Is there anything useful about it? No. Then don't tell me. I don't need to know it. Think about that. Wow, that's a really good... It isn't going to help you if it isn't, if it's possibly not true, if it's, you know, not a good story and it isn't useful. Isn't that profound? Socrates was highlighting the 3 pillars of New Church back then, all those centuries ago. Good, truth and use. And we've all done it. We've all done it. But my point is that when you get a hold of the Lord inside each one, when you can learn to see the Lord inside each soul, even the bad person, He's the one keeping their heart beating, their lungs breathing, their whole body healing. The so-called angry God of judgment could strike them down. No, they cut themselves, their body starts to heal. That's love. And here I am cutting them up with 1,000 knives in my mind, or maybe with my mouth, behind their back. And we all do it, we've all done it, but the point is that when we learn to see the Lord is there, it becomes a lot harder to slip out of dignity. Let's go a little further. He says here, Proverbs 31 is a beautiful scripture about dignity. He says here, she makes belts, linen garments, and sashes to sell in the merchants. She is clothed with strength and dignity. Beautiful. Strength and dignity go together there. She's clothed with that. And she laughs without fear of the future. Isn't that beautiful? She's got her eyes on the Lord. No one who's got their eyes on the Lord will be fearful about the future. And Psalm 62, they only consult to thrust him down with his dignity. They delight in lies. They bless with their mouths and they curse inwardly. Interesting. That's a contrasting sort of passage. 1 Timothy 2:1-4. First of all, then, I urge that petitions and prayers and intercessions and thanksgiving be offered on behalf of all men, for kings and all those in authority, so that we may lead tranquil and quiet lives in all goodness and dignity. This is good and pleasing in the sight of God our Saviour, who desires all men to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. He's saying, let your life be a dignified example in the hope that others that don't know the Lord may be saved. That's God's method. Be quiet and dignified. Quiet. Not shouting, you pig of a this, of a that, and we hear it. You hear a lot. When someone doesn't agree with you, you don't like them, it's so quick to use the four-lettered high verbals, the profanities and bad words. Quiet dignity. When someone's got real dignity and they've been quiet and then they speak. And they're not attacking, but they make a point and people are floored by the point that they've made. That's power. That's powerful. And that has a greater, longer impact than standing up and going, well, you this and that and every other word, because I haven't got any real logical argument for why, but I've got lots of terrible things I can say about you. Try and denigrate you. Why do we backbite? Because we feel a little elevated when we do it. Makes you feel better.
You feel like you're better
than the other.
the other person.
It can also be that you've got an interesting story to tell. You're not such a boring old... You've got some interesting story.
Frustration is one of those.
Frustration could be a good one, yes. Yeah. That's fair enough. You get frustrated and you say, oh, they're doing this again. But you can find a dignified way in that, can't you, too? You can let your frustrations out and you can say, what do I do about this? And someone says, why don't you write this letter and say that to them and do that and take that? Yeah. It's good. These are good answers people are giving. Okay. And Timothy 2:7, show yourselves in all respect to be a model of good works, and in your teachings show integrity and dignity, and a number of other things he goes on to say. Show integrity and dignity. That's beautiful. Look at the card, because we're going to find there's a beautiful passage in here from the writings, but the Lord himself says when he was challenged about paying taxes, that's a hot topic right now on the election weekend, the Lord said, who pays taxes? Subjects of the king or the servants of the king? And the answer was the servants. The subjects or the sons. He said the subjects of the king pay taxes, not the sons. I don't make my children pay me rent and pay me for the food. I mean, there might come a point where they're old enough that I'll encourage them to do that for the good principles. But children in my home are taken care of by me. But if a stranger brought their child over and said, can it live with you for a year, there would be some sort of economic recompense. And so that's the point that Jesus is making here. Who pays taxes, the sons or the servants? And he said, well, it's the seventh. He says, however, in order to be right before God and man, go and catch a fish, and in its mouth you'll find a coin. Go and pay our taxes. He also said, give me a coin. I said, whose head is this on the coin? And they said, Caesar's. Now there's a subtext here we don't often get, right? Because the coin has a head on it. Our coin has a head of the Queen or other figures on our dollar bills. But think about this, right? The coin gets the mark of the one who owns it, does it not? Render to Caesar what is Caesar's. Where do we get our image from? God. Render unto God what is God's. Give to man what's his, but remember who is the true owner of all life, isn't it? It's God. What man really has sovereign right to dominate another? They actually belong to God. Every one of us belong to the Lord because we carry his mark and image like a coin. Remember that. Dignity. It's a lot easier to look in a person's eyes and say there's a soul there and maintain dignity rather than see the individual frail person and their ego and all the trappings that come with being a human being on earth. Okay, so Jesus says, answering to them, render to Caesar what is Caesar's and render to God the things that are God's. And listen to this beautiful passage from Heaven and Hell 309. He says, all things in heaven are organized according with divine order. So there's the image again, the coin and the image, the head, the body, the feet. It's in order. And with that order comes dignity. Everything is organized according to divine order, which is everywhere guarded by the services performed by angels. And for this reason, a dignity is connected with every function according to the dignity of the use. Wow. That's saying the use that we do when we go to heaven keeps the image of God and creates dignity. That's why we show respect for the use, not for the individual, but for the use that that individual is performing. Think of it this way. A woman comes out into public and she's got beautiful garments on her and it makes her dignified. Someone comes along, some monster comes along and tears her clothes off and makes her naked. How undignified, isn't it? When we don't respect the use simply because we don't like the person, we're tearing the clothes off and stripping the person naked. Heaven is powerful and beautiful because of its uses keep the image of God, which is love and service. Isn't that amazing? That's an amazing little passage there. I'll just read that again. All things in heaven are organized in accordance with divine order, which is everywhere guarded by the services performed by angels. And for this reason, a dignity is connected with every function according to the dignity of that use. Nevertheless, an angel does not claim the dignity to himself or herself, but ascribes all dignity to the use. And as the use is the good that he accomplishes, and all good is from the Lord, so he ascribes all dignity to the Lord. Isn't that amazing? It's amazing. All right. So we're going to read this meditation in a moment. So I just want to stop for a moment and see what people's thoughts are. Do you feel a little more equipped, a little more guarded to show a bit more dignity next time someone's ranting and raving on and being not necessarily worthy of respect? How might you tackle that? Like what thoughts might come to you to help you in that situation?
Sort of had a situation like that the other day when I was waiting for someone at the bus station, and there was a discussion between the driver and a passenger, and it went on and on. The bus was stood there for a while holding up the world.
Oh, wow.
So I went over and because it was loud, the voices were getting louder, and I said, "How much are we arguing over?" I think that it was over paying, because I said, I have change, I've got money here. If I was willing to offer the fare if that was the problem. And the young man said, this big guy said, it's none of your business. And so I said, well, I was only offering to give change if that was the problem. And then I just walked away because the driver didn't say anything, because he said he's called the police. So the kerfuffle went on, and it was the principle of the thing that they were arguing about. But
and you were focusing on the higher use of just
then
getting the bus going.
I wondered maybe I shouldn't have opened up the discussion with that. Could have maybe said, "Can I help in this situation?"
Can I help in that situation? That's a good one, Bev. Can I help in this situation? Yeah. Can I help you resolve this? Yeah. That's good, Bev. That's good. Anyone else? Any final thoughts on?
I think it depends on the situation. It's like what the problem is, you know. I don't know.
You're saying you're going to need a different kind of tool every time, maybe?
Well, not necessarily. Well, just a different way of handling the situation. You wouldn't use that every time.
Something I do notice about that is that you were dignified in the way you handled it, Bev.
Yeah.
That's the important part. You walked away. You didn't drag yourself down to the level of arguing or debating. You offered help.
Once he said the driver had called the police.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right. Meditation. Everyone with me? There's power in that unity. I allow my heart to feel special in the eyes of God. My meditation is upon how the Lord loves and appreciates everyone. I always look for the best in my fellow human beings. I will bring no shame upon others, nor receive it from them. I acknowledge the Lord as the source of all worth and dignity. I am thankful, Lord, for the gift of dignity. It is your life and love that makes this virtue possible. And Lord, I pray, as this month unfolds until we come back again to another Abiding in the Vine, that you will lift our hearts and minds into how each life is valuable and we can exercise that dignity. We don't have to tolerate evil, Lord, but out of respect for you and love for you, we ask that you help us to maintain respect and dignity for ourselves and in how we treat other people. We thank you, Lord, that you are the reason that life is so valuable and worthwhile, that you love us unconditionally and we want to be more like you. Amen. So I'll close the word if you just sing with me a new commandment.
I give unto you that you love one another, as I have loved you, that you love one another, as I have loved you. By this shall all men know you are my disciples, if you have love one to another. By this shall all men know you are my disciples, if you have love one to another.
The Lord bless you. The Lord keep you. The Lord lift up his face upon you and his countenance upon you. The Lord give you his everlasting